I had a very strong feeling that this San Martin might be the best San Martin that I've ever experienced. But what it's turned out to be is the best watch that I've experienced from Aliexpress this year. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And San Martin, as I think we all know, have already been making great watches for such a long time, and I've always thought they're one of the best watch brands coming out of China. But over the last year or two, they seem to have made a bit of a shift into more original designs, into some great colors, and it's becoming more and more exciting to consider what watches that they are going to be releasing. And today, this SN0144, it has to be the best watch I've experienced from them. In fact, it has to be the best watch I've experienced from Aliexpress. In fact, it's probably the best watch I've ever experienced from any year or from Aliexpress. It is so good that I'm going to make a bit of a transition in my mind. I'm going to stop referring to San Martin watches as an Aliexpress brand and more think of them and describe them as a micro brand, because that seems to be where they are heading with this watch, with what they're releasing now. I think they deserve that title. Yes, they're probably going to still remain selling watches on Aliexpress, but I think that's just more of a sales outlet for them on top of other places where you can buy these watches. So San Martin is now, as far as I'm concerned, a micro brand. Now the watch I'm going to share with you today, this SN0144 in the blue color, because the blue is the one that really stood out to me. It did cost me money. In fact, I paid for the majority of this watch. However, San Martin were nice enough to give me a small discount, which is why you would have seen that sponsored icon pop up. And that is also why I'm going to leave some links down below. Now, it is about to be the 11/11 sale, the biggest sale of the year on Aliexpress. And the new releases don't always get discounted. So this one may not get discounted in the sale. And at the time of filming this particular video, this watch is $350 US. And initially, I have to admit, when you think of a watch coming out of China, especially a watch that's being sold on Aliexpress, that sounds like quite a lot of money. But I knew before this watch even arrived that not only was it the right price, in fact, it's probably actually quite cheap. Let me show you why I think that, and why I also think this watch is just so good. So $350 US may sound like a lot of money for an Aliexpress watch. I think, however, we're starting to sort of understand that San Martin do really good quality watches that are a little bit beyond what we would normally expect from any other sort of Aliexpress watch. But what I can tell you right now, that this watch has arrived on my doorstep, that it is not only sort of worth that $350 US, it's actually quite surprising that it is only $350 US. And when this one did arrive on my doorstep, I had some pretty high expectations for it, and all those expectations were met, and there were 5 things that really did stand out to me. Firstly is the movement that is inside this watch. It's one of my favorite all-time movements. It is a good quality movement, it is reliable, it is thin, which is important, and it is high beat. This one has the Miyota 9015. I love those movements. I think they are fantastic, and that brings me to the second thing that sort of stands out to me about this watch, and that is the width of it, or the thickness. Because at just over 10 millimeters, that is very noticeable. The more watches that I buy and wear, the more I come to understand that 10 is a bit of a magic number for watch thicknesses. Because it doesn't actually have to be exactly 10, but if it's in that sort of range, just under, just over, it creates an on-wrist experience that really sort of stands out to me. So 10 for me is that magic number, and this one of course has that number. And of course the third thing that stood out to me is that dial, but not just how beautiful it is, but just how different it is in different lights. As you can see here with the sort of studio lights, but sort of angled down to sort of protect it from those lights a little bit, you can see that it has a sort of a darker outer ring, but then you bring it into the light and it changes, and then you bring it into the sunshine, and yes, it's completely different again. The colors, the sort of fume effect, but also that textures on the dial is an absolute standout, even more than I expected. And the first watch I've ever actually come across where it in real life looks significantly better than the studio shots taken by the manufacturer. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I was just really hoping that if you have not already done so, would you mind just hitting that subscribe button? It honestly makes such a huge difference to me and this channel. Thanks for that. Let's get back to this watch. The next is the bracelet. In fact, this bracelet is so interesting and so good that I'm even considering making a video specifically just about this bracelet. Firstly, look at the tolerances. There's no gaps whatsoever. Secondly, because of that, I'm rather surprised at how much movement there actually is with those. Sometimes you get these bracelets which have zero tolerances, but then they basically don't bend more than that. This one, of course, bends a lot more than that. Then there's also some 3D effect to it. You'll see that center section is raised, and then brushing, polishing, brushing, polishing, brushing as well, which gives it a really nice look. They are also screw links as well, and I had to remove 3 to fit my 17cm wrists. Now, I did have one problem with one of the screws. It wasn't working for me particularly well, but then all the others, no issues whatsoever. And lastly, it's just the combination, but also the quality of the finishing. Brushing on top of that solid bezel, polishing, brushing, polishing, brushing, and then a bit of polish underneath as well. It just creates a nice movement between brush, polish, and I really like that on watches. Rather than all one or just a little bit of a highlight, having that sort of changes and flicking back and forth and then linking into that bracelet as well gives you the light play, but it just gives you a detail that I find very interesting. Now, it has quite a flat case to it, so you'll see it sort of sits across my wrist a little bit, but you'll see that it is also very thin, so it sits down lovely on wrist. This bracelet really captures my 17cm wrist really well. You can see it just sort of holds together and it tapers down a little bit. And they've also got their new clasp on this one. So yes, it fits my 17cm wrist well, but that bracelet, oh, it just creates a whole different experience. And then there is this clasp. This clasp has the San Martin logo, brushing, polishing, brushing, in keeping with the rest of the watch, double pushes, all milled as we'd expect, and some micro adjustment, or like a sliding micro. It feels like there's like 3 positions. It feels a little bit gritty, probably not quite as soft as I would hope, but realistically, what I do like from that is just then how thin it is, so it fits in nicely with the rest of the watch. This feels like a watch that all the elements fit together. Sometimes with Aliexpress watches and even San Martin watches, it does feel like they're cobbled together a little bit. Not a particularly bad thing. I'm not sort of complaining about that. I don't really have any issues generally about that, but it is nice when there is a package put out where all the elements fit together to create something special. Not only just a beautiful dial or a well-finished watch or an interesting bracelet, but the entire package is something special, which is why I think this one is my favorite watch release from Aliexpress this year. In fact, it might actually be the best watch I've experienced that has come out of China. Now, I don't normally show Lume on these sort of first impression styles videos, but because this is a relatively new release and there's not that many videos out there about it yet, and the sale is just about to start, as I'm not really sure if the sale is actually going to give it an extra discount or not because it is such a new release, but I thought because it is a relatively new watch and there aren't that many videos, I'll just give you a little bit extra with this sort of first impressions video. And on that note, I might as well show you quickly just the dimensions. 39mm case, I'd already shown you that thickness, nice compact lug to lug, but with those male end links, it does stick out a bit further, but they do curve down nicely, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. This is a watch I know is going to be staying in my collection longer term. It's something special and I love it. So as usual with watches that are staying longer in my collection, I'm going to circle back to this one in a couple of months' time and give you a proper on-wrist experience, full in-depth review. But whilst you wait for that one, with the sale just sort of happening, maybe it's worth checking out a couple more of my other videos that might be worthwhile watching next.